My name is Moshe Vardi, and I'm professor of computer science at Rice University. My work has, in some sense, been touching on AI for a long time. I mean, going back all the way to my PhD dissertation was about using logic to specify database management systems. So it was always around logic and reasoning. I mean, in some sense, logic has been the theme of my research for really from the very beginning. I mean, it was not thought so much in AI. We thought of the time as database management systems, but it was really, if I look over my whole career, it was always about automated reasoning. So when I was in college, I was in the stacks, and I saw a small book called I, Robot. And I said, well, what is this book? And I pulled it out and I started reading. And I think I finished the book standing in the stacks, okay? And I just discovered Asimov and I loved it. And that was actually how I discovered science fiction. I had no exposure to science fiction before that. It was just how I stumbled on science fiction. But it was clear that it was, you know, your mind segment thing. This is fiction, this is it. And it seemed just always incredibly far from the reality of research, where we are incredibly far from it. In some sense, to me, the kind of a turning point was in 2011, when IBM's Watson won Jeopardy. Because before that, even when Deep Blue won in chess, I said, okay, you know, it was just clearly brute force search somehow. I said, okay, it's a natural progress, but I did not seem like real intelligence, even though the program paid very well. But Watson somehow seemed like a glimpse of intelligence there. And that was the point in which I started thinking more deeply about the possible implications of AI. So my current work in AI is, again, I mean, logic has been the theme of my research for many years. But one of the things is, you know, in AI there have been different schools of thought. There was McCarthy, who was very much about symbolic reasoning. And then Perel was about probabilistic reasoning. And today in my research, I'm trying to combine the two. So how do we combine logic and probabilistic reasoning in the same framework, which gives us a principled approach, for example, to do probabilistic inference. You know, it's clear that we are living in a world with a lot of uncertainty, and that means that when you have machines that are going to make decisions or recommendation, they will always come with some degree of certainty. And what my work is trying to do is to inject doing it in a principled way. In fact, I'm followed something has become known as PAC, probably approximately correct, which is try to have quantify the accuracy and quantify the certainty of your inference. Most of the time, it's not done that way. I mean, for some reason, we live in the age of hype. Okay, I mean, just starting from Watson in 2011. I mean, we have, if you look, in fact, most of the funding today for AI R&D come from the commercial side. It's almost impossible for this corporation to give you a dispassionate and nuanced description of what happened, because it is so much tied to their commercial interest. You know, I don't know, it's just fair to blame the corporation. There is, you know, this is the style of today. You have to sensationalize everything. The media tend to sensationalize it. A very important result about 3 years ago, pure algorithmic result. It was the graph isomorphism can be solved in quasi-polynomial time, which is a beautiful mathematical result, algorithmic result. And the hype was, we finally can solve this hard problem can be finally solved practically. And none of that was true. I mean, somehow, I think even the researchers tend to exaggerate the importance of what they are doing, and so we're drowning in hype. You know, it's actually a bit of a dilemma. And the dilemma is because I talk a lot to the media, and I was, in fact, a couple of years ago, I was in a news conference, a press conference with two of my colleagues, and it had to do with the future of AI. And if you try to be very measured and very nuanced, you know, it's like what you do in photography. It gets washed away. There's so much, it gets washed away. If there is too much lights and somehow the nuances gets washed away. The reporters, what they want are sound bites. If you give them sound bites, so I actually know, so I know how to give sound bites. And I was quoted by about 1,000 newspapers. And I feel sorry for my two colleagues who are trying to be careful academics, and it's just not dramatic enough. I mean, the public loves drama. They need to have this, if you tell them, well, on one hand, on the other hand, it may be good, it may not be good, it's not a story. So unfortunately, the nature of media today is if you don't sensationalize it, it's just something else. You know, they will always go the most sensational story. If you try to tell them a careful story, boring, they'll go to another sensational story. So it's a very delicate balance between I do want to reach out, and that involves some element of sensationalism, but still how do you do it in a somewhat responsible way? It's a delicate balance. Maybe a decade ago, more than a decade ago, I had like one day training in talking to the media, which was immensely useful. Actually, I think we should do it more broadly. They actually this was an outfit by, you know, the mainstream media is declining today because of much of the income for advertising has gone to digital advertising. So this was some reporter who lost their jobs in newspapers, and they've created the outfit to train people how to talk to the media. This was actually just not even one day, half a day, but it was immensely useful to tell you how the whole thing works, and we should do it more broadly, teach people how to talk to the media. It depends whom are you talking about, okay? So you're using AI all the time. Every time you go to Google and you do a search, you use AI, okay? Every time you go to, you know, all these recommendation systems we are using all the time, they're all AI. If you look at, I would say it's professionals. Most of the time, technology, AI and technology is making us more productive. On just our ability to communicate, think of our ability to communicate with people all around the world, okay? And in fact, it makes us so productive that if you ask almost any professional today, go to the conference here and ask people, how many hours do you work per week? I don't think you'll find anybody who say, oh, I just work 9 to 5 every day. You won't find such people. So, well, I catch up on email in the evening, I do my writing on the weekend. We all overwork, and one reason is because we're so productive. Technology has made us more productive. And so for us, technology is really an augmenting technology, making us more productive. And the nature of our business is such that if you're an academic, you're more productive, it doesn't mean we need fewer academics. It means, okay, I get to publish more papers. No university says, okay, if our professor used to publish 3 papers per year, and now they publish 4 papers per year, we need fewer professors. Nobody said that. We said, okay, great, we're more productive. But if you take people who work in, let's say, manufacturing, and you know, there was this panel here about how we can augment people rather than replace them. But if you make these people more productive, you know, the manufacturer may decide, okay, I need fewer employees. Maybe I can sell more, but it's not clear I can sell more. Maybe it's not clear there is demand for more or whatever. I may need fewer people. So how technology has been impacting work, it partly depends where in the workforce you are. And labor economists have talked about what they call the polarization of the workforce. So they look at the workforce by the skill level, which you can think salary is a proxy for skill, is a decent proxy for skill. And what they see is that the high end of the skill level, technology augments people, and therefore people with technological skill are in much demand today. The salary goes up, and these people are doing very well. At the very low end of the skill spectrum, think of the person who rearranged this room. We don't have robots who can rearrange the room from one configuration to the other. This requires tremendous amount. I mean, the state of the art in robotics is we are very far from it. But how much are we paying people who are rearranging the room? We're paying them somewhere around minimum wage. So they have not been impacted by technology much. Where has technology has the most impact, adverse impact, in the middle of the skill spectrum, where these are called routine jobs, and where the pay is more than minimum wage, so it makes sense. I mean, economically, you have incentive to automate. Manufacturing has been the sweet spot for automating. The job is routine, and we used to pay them $20, $25 an hour. This was nice middle class wages. This is where so far manufacturing had the biggest impact. When you look over the years, what you find out, the definition of routine is changing, because the routine depends partly on what machines can do. So over time, the routine part has been moving up the skill ladder, so to speak, up the skill spectrum. And suddenly it means more and more people are suddenly being affected by this. But if you look over the last, I would say, 30 years, the biggest impact has been so far on manufacturing. One is the work routine will keep expanding, but the reality is that lots of people who do all kinds of projections, and you should take all of them with a boulder of salt. Because one thing to understand about the economy is just a very complex system of feedback relationships. So, what happens? You take something and you automate it. Well, ultimately you need fewer workers, you increase productivity. If you increase productivity, prices will decline. If prices will decline, demand will go up. How does it all balance in the end? The answer is we don't know. It could be that there will be more jobs will be created than jobs are destroyed, or it could be the other way around. Really, nobody knows. Okay? What we have seen so far was that the jobs that were created were high-skilled jobs. And that's why people today with high skill are doing very well. The jobs that were destroyed were middle-skilled jobs. And so now what happens to the people who lost their jobs? They can try to side skill, which means find other jobs with the same skill level. There are fewer of them. They can try to upskill. Upskilling is very, very difficult for people to do, especially we're talking to someone who is, let's say, in their 40s and their 50s. You tell them, well, you can go and become a coder. Not so simple if you take a minor and make them a coder, or they can downskill. Downskilling also means for them loss of income. At some point they say it's not worth it for me to work, and that's why we have seen huge decline in the what's called labor force participation rate, which is the rate in which people participate in the workforce. More and more people are giving up. Has been huge impact on men. The labor force participation rate for men has been declining now for about 50 years. Books are written, nobody fully understands why are men dropping out of the workforce. Sometimes there would be perverse explanation. Somebody has looked to see what are these men doing. They find especially young men, when they're out of the workforce, they're playing video games. So the conclusion was they drop out of the workforce so they can play video games, which I think is just completely perverse. But this is now, if you look at, especially you look at men without college education, which is high school or less, about 1 in 5 such men is not working, which is something that we think holds for an economy in deep depression. When we talk about 20% of men not working, these are men between 25 and 54. And this is huge. A book came out a couple of years ago, Men Without Work, and the author said this is a national crisis. To have so many men without work, it's a national crisis. It has a huge social impact, goes beyond just the job market. I mean, these men lose their social status, they lose their income. It has huge impact on marriage. Marriage is declining because this man has less to offer in the matrimonial marketplace, so to speak. So this has huge impact on society. You go back to Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, and they have been asking these questions, which to them was one of the most fundamental questions in philosophy, which they call it, what is the good life? Which really, it's a not very good translation. Eudaimonia, it's more, what is the meaningful life? And at the end, the answer, meaningful life is the life in which a person is needed and a person has a feeling of making some kind of a contribution. And when you take this away from people, you rob them of their dignity. I mean, people who feel, think of the movie, what is it? It's a Wonderful Life. Okay? When he basically, I forgot his name, Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith, what's his name in the movie? I don't remember. But he thinks he failed and he's about to commit suicide. And the angel comes and shows him what impact he has on people's life. And he decides not to commit suicide because he realized he made an impact on people's life. His life suddenly gets meaning. And the meaning is not just internal meaning. We are social animals. The meaning is we made a difference in other people's lives. I don't quite see that the AI system get the power, but more we are seduced by technology, you know, by entertainment value of technology, by the convenience power of technology. I mean, somebody has recently written about the tyranny of convenience, okay? If I have to think, okay, should I get into my car? I just need something from the drugstore, and I can get into my car and I'll drive, and you know, I probably will take me half an hour to go get to the drugstore and come back. Or I can sit down and click on something, and in 5 minutes I'll order it. I will order it online. Especially Amazon has a brilliant idea, Amazon Prime. You already pay for the shipping in some sense, right? Now you feel, oh, I should order to get the value of my Amazon Prime. So you order it. Now the outcome may be that this store that I would ever have gone to buy, this store may close. And if you look at our urban geography, part of the diversity of this is the retail establishment that we have it. And what happens when these things close? I mean, in some sense, if we want to kind of to see what happened, we can look, not even, it doesn't require technology. Look what happened when Walmart came to small towns. And they go outside and open a huge store. And the parking is easy, not like in the downtown strip. And they can offer more selections. What happened? Main Street was destroyed, basically. This has huge impact, social impact, because Main Street was also gave you if you think who are the civic leadership of these small towns, it was the merchant of Main Street. And when this was done, this town lost a layer of civic leadership. The fact that technology can destroy community, I read a story years ago, it's stuck in my mind. This was after Franco died in Spain. And Spain was a very backward country compared to the rest of Europe. And now Spain suddenly is becoming democratic, it joins the EU, and one of the things, many villages did not have flowing waters. And so they said, wow, we are in the 20th century now. In this place still, they go to the river to wash, they go to the well to bring water. We have to bring them water into the houses. And of course, it was much more convenient. These villages, the social structure was destroyed. And the reason is because the men used to go together to bring water from the well. And that was where people met and associated and schmoozed, and there was the social gathering place. And the women went to the river to wash. And suddenly, when you took this away, and everybody can do everything now in their home, social relationships broke down. Think of what happened in America when you introduced the garage door opener. Okay? Before that, people would get their car, get out of the car, people arrive at the same time, your neighbor is also arriving at the same time, you exchange some words, it's not very much, but at least you have some interaction with your neighbor. Now, days can go by, you have no interaction with your neighbor, right? People used to sit on the porch, now they're inside the house watching TV. So yes, technology has this impact, so technology for a while, throughout the 20th century has been destroying social relationships. And we as a society have not we have not thought hard enough how do we compensate for that. You know, I mean, there is this phenomenon now, for example, where people suddenly go to look for high school friends that they have not seen for ages, right? And it was just too difficult to find them. Now you go and you Google them, you go on Facebook and you have renewed. You know, my wife just now met someone, connected with someone she has not seen for 50 years. And somehow he looked her up on Facebook. This is from when they were teenagers. And so suddenly, you know, there is this value. You know, I mean, in truth is that I go now to many places and people come to me and say, oh, I'm your Facebook friend. And they say, I feel as if I know you, you know, we've never met, but we share information. So yes, there is value for these things. You know, I mean, we need more, I think, refine. This will require some more social science to try to assess what have we lost and what have we gained. Recommender system, I'm not sure I would say they're taking away our decision-making power. You know, even if they give you a set of options. So you think you're making the decision, but somebody a machine made a decision what options to show you. You bought a book. Other people that bought this book bought other books, right? And somebody made a decision to show you some set of books. So even if you get to choose, the set of choices has been framed to you by a machine. And so we need to kind of, we may think, well, I'm making a choice. But this is it's a bit of an illusion here. You get to make a choice, but someone has framed to you exactly the sort of choices that have been made. I complain to our librarian, because when we have the card catalog, I would discover books by proximity of cards, because they were indexed by subject matter. And in some sense, Amazon is kind of recreating this idea, and I wish our library catalog would give me something similar to that. So yes, this is, it's a, look, I mean, in terms of giving us access to information, I mean, just think of the ease, I'm looking at the trees here, I want to know, is this really a poplar tree or not? And years ago I would say, I have no idea, I'll have to go to the library to find out, it's too much work. Now I can just take a picture and go to my room and upload the picture and bang, in 5 minutes you have the answer. So in terms of access to people like us who are in the information business, technology has been an enormous boon, right? I mean, just the ability to find information I'm still enjoy every time I go and I find so quickly an answer to a question that's been bugging me. So I have to say, I have a hard time fully understanding the concept of autonomy, and I've debated with some of my colleagues who are very passionate now about lethal autonomous weapon system. And I've tried to understand better the concept of autonomy, because first of all, autonomy has to do with someone with causality. Who made decision to do X, right? You say autonomous means the system it's the system decision that caused the things to happen. And causality is already a very complex thing to define exactly causality. So I've asked them, for example, I said, I'll give an example. Take the Terminator. Was the Terminator autonomous? So the Terminator, if you remember the story, Skynet sent the Terminator, go back in time and kill, make sure that this woman gets killed so she doesn't give birth to the boy, and so on and so forth. So was the Terminator autonomous? So the decision was made by Skynet. Now, of course, the Terminator then goes and proceed incredibly, to us, of course it's an actor, but the story is that they proceed incredibly autonomously, even though the big decision was made by Skynet, but all the details, how to do that, that's left to the Terminator to figure out. And if you watch the movie, you said, well, yeah, the Terminator looks pretty autonomous to me. But some people say, no, the decision was made by Skynet. So I'm actually having a hard time grappling, and partly because autonomy has to do with agency and with free will. And these are very thorny concepts, I mean, people are debating, even the whole concept of free will is very, very debatable. Do we have free will? Did our brain made me do it? I mean, this is, you can go and dive deeply into this. So we have an intuitive sense what is autonomy, but if you dig into it, if I take my car and I said, okay, drive me to ice, but I don't need to hold the steering wheel, is the car now autonomous? I say, no, the car is just doing what I told the car to do, okay? So even now, many functions in the car, I don't control the wheels directly, right? There are lots of levels of mediation. Think of even more sophisticated things like fly-by-wire. There are lots of levels between what the pilot does and what happens in the wing. So I'm having a hard time defining autonomy now, given the complexity of technology. Autonomous car, it just means that I don't hold the driving wheel, but I told the car where to go. But when I talk about autonomy in the context of weapons, the thing about the kill decision is made by the machine, not necessarily the means. Suppose I tell there is this, if Skynet told Terminator to kill, somehow as if it takes away the autonomy. So I think that this, in my opinion, the discussion right now is very muddled. I think we need to have a much clearer definition of what exactly do we mean by autonomy. And this is a very good, nice terminology, this distinction between the tactical decisions and the strategic decisions, so to speak, and what level of autonomy do we really care about, the strategic one or the tactical one? So lethal autonomous weapons. So you look today at a military situation, and people some have very simplistic view of a robot that holds the weapons and shoots someone. But today you really deal with very large complex systems. And describing causality becomes very, very complicated. And who, and so if you want to say, let's look today at an artillery battery, okay? And now there is an officer of artillery battery, and this is a war. Now, clearly, you can imagine a situation where an infantry soldier holds a gun and shoots and kills an enemy soldier. You can say, okay, you killed that person. It's very clear to us. But now let's look at an artillery battery. So an officer gave command. Okay, that's a command. It goes back to the guns. In the gun, somebody has to load the gun. Somebody has to aim the gun. Somebody has to give the fire command. Somebody has to pull a trigger. Who made if eventually, let's suppose the projectile went out and people were killed. Who killed them? And you cannot ascribe it to individual. The answer was, well, collectively, all these people worked together and other people were killed. But if you try to break it down, the responsibility, you have to do what we do in some situations. You say, how much are you responsible? It's not an absolute responsibility, but if this happens in a court, in a legal setting, there will be some debate, and you say, okay, this person is responsible for 10% of this is 5%. You have to break responsibility in a very refined way to understand what happened. The same way, if you have now, if an automated vehicle, I prefer to say automated vehicle, AV, rather than autonomous vehicle, automated vehicle, if the accident was caused, we'll have to go and do a very fine setting. How much was the other side at fault? How much was the road may have been at fault? Or the technology was at fault? Or the technology was not operated properly? You can imagine there are many, many factors, and the answer would be at the end, maybe there will be 10 different responsible parties, and we will divide the responsibility between them in a very refined way. I think if it went to court, it will require a deep analysis of what happened. Did the patient give the doctor all the relevant details? If I didn't tell you that I'm allergic to sulfur, and I was prescribed sulfur, then I'm partly at fault. Okay, the patient may have not given full information. It will partly depend on when a machinist tells the doctor what to do. What are the norms? Do we expect the doctor to just blindly say, well, this is what the system told me to do, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not really playing independent role. Or will the norms of medicine to say the machine have to provide, here are the options, here's the explanation, and you make the final decision. So we are not there yet to make this happen. Now, suppose the machine made the wrong recommendation. What was it? Was the software at fault? Was maybe the software would probably had to be trained? Maybe the training was not sufficient. Not enough examples were given to machine to train. Was the training at fault? I think you have to do a very deep analysis to understand what's happening. I read some time ago there was a horrific accident in Belgium, where a ferry went from Belgium, a port in Belgium, to the UK, and it turned out the hold doors where the cars are was not properly closed. And it filled up with water, and it sank, and hundreds of people drowned. And they says, who is the idiot that didn't close the doors? Let's find that person, who knows, throw them out to the sea. And they did an analysis. And the analysis was that it was a combination of like 15 different things. One sensor was at fault, and there was a backup sensor, but it was not triggered. And you find it was a very complex system. And really, for the whole thing to happen, it's like tossing a coin, 10 times, and they all had to come out heads for this to happen. And so now you say, who is at fault? Well, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. We like simplistic answer. Who is at fault? We want to catch someone. But the answer is going to be almost always going to be very complicated answer, I believe. If you buy a car, and let's suppose there is some mechanical failure of the car and some accident happens. By now we have enough of legal experience to say, how do we do this? And basically we say, it's the manufacturer responsibility. We usually say the car dealer is not responsible unless the car dealer did something unusual. And the manufacturer have strict liability, we call it. So we don't even go let's examine what happened in the factory and how it happened. So manufacturing, you bought a car, this is a GM car, GM is responsible. And we have simplified away all kind of very deep analysis because we don't want to do this analysis every time. We say the car failed, it's a GM car, GM is responsible. And I think what will happen over time, first of all, so far, for historical reasons, software has been exempted from strict liability. In fact, not only that, software try to exempt it for any liability. Almost any software where you use it, they say, use it on your own risk. And we will have, first of all, to come to grips. This is something that runs a huge part of our life. There should be no exemption from software from the same rule that we have for cars. Okay? When you take a car, you don't have to tear a shrink wrap wrapping of the car, and there's no shrink wrap license to say, well, use this car at your own risk. Okay? You don't go ahead, caveat emptor, check the car. We say, no, the manufacturer is liable, end of story. And I think over time, we will get more experience with using this kind of automated decision-making, medical decision-making, and most likely we will say we can't go afford to every time to make this such a complicated analysis, and we will say the system made a mistake, end of story. The vendor, whoever developed the system, the vendor is responsible, end of story, without doing this very complicated analysis to say, well, 5% for the software vendor, 5% for the hardware vendor, and do this, because it's just too tedious to do this analysis for every litigation. We just don't have enough experience in this kind of litigations to simplify things in such a way. The Microsoft chatbot that learned racism from reading Twitter. But again, we could say, well, it's not really the bot's responsibility, this person told the bot. Or we would just say, to make life simpler, whoever makes a bot is responsible. And yes, there are all kinds of complicated factors, but we're going to create a simpler legal situation. But the answer is, the law we are very far behind on these cases, not just in AI, just generally in the whole legal framework for software and tort and liability. The practice the law has not caught up to the reality of the marketplace already. And I'm guessing that as this machine becomes more prevalent in our life, litigation becomes more common, we will see more and more this situation. In fact, there was a case a couple of years ago, I think there was a case with Toyota with some failure, I forgot, I think maybe it was braking or speeding, and there was a litigation, and the conclusion was they brought expert witnesses who examined the firmware. And the conclusion was that that firmware was such poor quality that without finding the explicit causality, Toyota was found liable. Just because the expert says, we're looking at the firmware, the software essentially is crappy, and therefore you're liable, even though we cannot exactly ascribe to say this happened because of this. End of story. End of story. Crappy software, you're liable. And this is kind of one step in some sense towards strict liability, which I believe that's where we should be going.
That's the end of my main questions. We have one final optional question for you.
Yeah.
We're curious if you want to share with us your thoughts on the development of general artificial intelligence, AGI.
I have to say that on one hand, I'm on two minds on this. Because on one hand, I'm a materialist. That means that I think we're machines. We're a machine developed by evolution, starting, over really billions of years in some sense. But ultimately, it's just a machine. Machine meant from proteins, DNA, what have you. It's a machine. And if it's a machine, I don't see any general reason why we shouldn't be able to build from other kind, non-biological machine that will be just intelligent as human being. So philosophically, I don't see any barrier. At the same time, when you ask people what is general artificial intelligence, I cannot even get a satisfactory definitions. In fact, if you talk to psychologists, and you ask them to define intelligence, you find they don't have an agreement what is intelligence. Is it a one thing? Is it a unitary thing? Or is it just a portfolio of capabilities that we have evolved over the years, and it's very nicely packaged in one form factor, okay? And so, and in fact, if you go back to Turing paper from 1950 about intelligent machines, Turing realized the difficulty of defining intelligence. So what he tried to avoid the problem by defining what you call the imitation game. Now, I actually think it's the weakest part of the paper, because it takes the ability to have a conversation as the test of intelligence, and at best it is only one aspect of intelligence. Okay, there are many other aspects of intelligence. But I could imagine that we define it as not one Turing test, but we say, well, here is what people can do, and we can define a portfolio of capabilities, and maybe there will be, I don't know, 20, 100, 200 capabilities, and imagine that we are able to do all of them at the same level as human beings and package them nicely together. And at that point, the distinction between weak AI and strong AI almost disappears. So I'm not sure that there is something so-called general artificial intelligence, or AGI, artificial general intelligence, or do we just need to do enough intelligent tasks well and package them well together and have them integrate well together with each other. And I suspect that that's probably the way AI will progress, not by achieving some mythical AGI about which I'm skeptical, but making enough progress on weak AI, but enough of them, and packaging them together, that the end result will be systems that behave very intelligently across a variety of ways.
That was my last question. Is there anything you would like to add that we have not talked about?
You know, you touched before on the issue of human dignity, and I think this is going to come back to us. I mean, these questions of the essence of humanity, and so we are treating. On one hand, I said I'm a materialist, so I think humans are just part of nature, and I mean, I don't see a distinction between us and other animals, other than that we have evolved intelligence. Other dogs can smell better than us. Other animals run faster. We are much smarter than anyone else. But at the same time, we all behave in terms of our morality as if we are above nature. We're halfway between nature and God. Okay, we're somewhere half in the middle. So, for example, we say human lives are precious. Why? Well, it's a moral principle. It's has been a very good principle for society to treat human beings as very, very special. And part of what the progress of intelligence artificial intelligence is going to do is to kind of erode our specialness. Already, I think I see people are talking about human rights for robots, which I think is a horrible idea, okay? Because it degrades human rights for humans. I have no problem the same way that we have laws against cruelty to animals. I have no problems against laws against cruelty to robots, okay? That's fine with me. But I think this illogical thing that we have done, which is to treat human beings as somehow as sacred, as special category in the universe, deserving special treatment, has been the basis of even thinking all human beings are born with inalienable rights. Where does it come from? It's again this idea that we treat human beings as very, very special. And this is to me the basis of human morality, and we should not toy with it. I don't think we should give robots human rights. We should not give corporations human rights. We are eroding human rights by giving them away to other things. Either they are corporations, robots, or gorillas. We should keep human treating as essential. I know it's speciesism. Some people say it's speciesism. But to me, this is the basis of morality, and we should not give it up lightly. So there was this British show, now I forget what it is called, Things? What was the show called? There was a British show, Humans, I think it was called Humans, in which the robots, played by humans of course, are so human that it becomes difficult to say which one are which. And I think we need to think very hard before doing this. I look at the people who do these human-like robots, and I don't quite understand why we need to make robots that would look just like humans. It could be that we could decide, and I have not thought about it fully, but I could imagine that we should not let technology be our master. We should be the master of technology. We talked about CPSR, and they had a very nice slogan: technology is driving the future. Who is holding the driving wheel? I think we should be holding the driving wheel. Just because something is technologically feasible, it does not mean we should necessarily do it. Usually, we follow every possible technology, but so far there's one exception, which was also somehow a threat to, I think, our notion of human dignity, and this is human cloning. And everybody kind of is freaked out by human cloning, and we so far as a society said, don't go there. Why? because we see it as a threat to the concept of the sacredness of humanity. And we should have a dialogue. Should we have robots that are so human that one cannot make the distinction between them and human? And if you ask me, I would say no. We should distinguish between robots and humans. We should keep humans special.
Google had this agent that they demonstrated a year ago.
Yeah.
That would call for you to a restaurant and
Yeah.
make a reservation
Yeah.
for you. And it did not divulge that it's a robot.
Yeah.
So it had a natural sounding voice.
Yes, yes, yeah. Duplex,
The
duplex,
journalists
yeah.
had a big negative response to duplex.
People freaked out. I think it was the same kind of thing. Oh my God.
It's what you're talking about. I think.
Yes.
It's
And
similarity.
in fact, Toby Walsh wrote an article, a viewpoint article in CCM a couple of years ago. Basically said there should be a law that a robot you should always be able to tell, are you talking to a human or to a robot? Okay? And it's one thing to say, should we have robots, should we have system with such human-sounding voice, or should we have a law that says if a robot is using a human voice, we should always start by saying, this is a robot talking to you. I think people should know. I think this is something we need. The issue is thrust upon us. Technology is running very fast, and we are facing the same issue of what's called deep fake, the ability to simulate reality in such a way that we're not going to be able to tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. And we need to start this conversation now. We need to bring technologists and social scientists and philosophers. My worry is if we're not doing this, we'll find ourselves is the technology will run ahead. And we're already seeing now that our ability to forecast the social implications of technology are very, very poor. We're running ahead. Look what we have done with social media. Facebook said, frictionless sharing, what can go wrong? Now we see what can go wrong. Maybe we need to sometimes slow down and think about where are we going with technology.